The stagecoach wheel hit another rut in the dusty Texas road, and Willa Hayes gripped the wooden bench beneath her, as everything she owned threatened to tumble from the overhead rack, her heart pounding with the terrible certainty that she had made the worst mistake of her life. She pressed her gloved hand against the window frame, watching the endless stretch of desert landscape roll past in shades of brown and gold. It was 1878, and she had traveled from Boston with nothing but 2 trunks, a small inheritance from her aunt, and the desperate need to disappear from a life that had become unbearable. Her father had died 3 months ago, leaving her with debts she could never repay and a stepmother who had wasted no time informing her that there was no place for her in the household anymore. The choice had been simple: accept a marriage proposal from a banker twice her age who looked at her like she was a piece of property, or leave everything behind and start fresh somewhere no one knew her name. She had chosen the latter, pointing to a map and selecting Marfa, Texas, because it was far enough away that no one would ever think to look for her there. The advertisement in the newspaper had been brief: teacher wanted for small border town, room and board provided, salary modest but steady. Willa had written immediately, stretching the truth about her experience but not about her education. She had graduated from a women's academy, could read Latin and Greek, and had spent 2 years helping at a charity school before her father's shipping business had collapsed under the weight of bad investments and worse luck. The stagecoach driver shouted something unintelligible, and the horses slowed. Willa leaned forward, catching her first glimpse of Marfa through the dusty window. It was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of low buildings scattered along a single main street with the endless Texas sky pressing down from above. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy in the late afternoon heat. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. This was really happening. There was no going back now. The stage rolled to a stop in front of a building with a hand-painted sign that read General Store and Post Office. Willa waited as the driver climbed down, her mouth dry with nerves. When he opened the door and offered his hand, she took it, stepping down into the dusty street on legs that felt unsteady after days of travel. "Marfa, miss," the driver announced, already moving to untie her trunks from the back of the coach. "Someone meeting you." "I believe so," Willa said, though she had no idea what to expect. Her letter of acceptance had been signed by someone named Mrs. Porter, who ran the boarding house where she would be staying. A small crowd had gathered, the arrival of the stagecoach apparently being notable entertainment. Willa felt their eyes on her, assessing her dusty traveling dress, her dark hair pinned up beneath a simple hat, her pale skin that marked her as clearly from somewhere else. She lifted her chin, refusing to show her uncertainty. "Miss Hayes." She turned to find a woman approaching, perhaps 50 years old, with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. "I am Mrs. Porter. Welcome to Marfa." "Thank you," Willa said, relieved to have been claimed. "I appreciate you meeting me, Mrs." Porter's gaze swept over her, not unkindly but with clear assessment. "You are younger than I expected, and prettier. That will cause talk." Willa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I assure you I am qualified to teach." "I am sure you are, or the town council would not have hired you. Come along. Your trunks will be delivered to the boarding house shortly. You must be exhausted and hungry." Willa fell into step beside the older woman, grateful for her brisk efficiency. They walked down the main street, past a saloon from which piano music drifted, a blacksmith shop, a small bank, and various other establishments that made up the heart of the town. People called greetings to Mrs. Porter, their curious gazes sliding to Willa. "The school is at the far end of town," Mrs. Porter explained. You will have about 15 students, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Some of the ranchers' children come in when they can spare them from work. It is not Boston, Miss Hayes. I did not expect it to be, Willa said quietly. That is rather the point. Mrs. Porter gave her a sharp look but said nothing more until they reached a 2-story wooden building with a wide porch. This is home. I have 6 rooms for rent, and currently 4 are occupied. Supper is at 6. No alcohol, no male visitors, and you are expected to maintain standards appropriate to your position. Understood? Yes, madam. Good. Your room is on the 2nd floor, first door on the right. Come down when you are ready, and I will introduce you to the others. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small desk, and a window that looked out over the street. Willa's trunks arrived shortly after, carried by a young man who tipped his hat and refused her offer of a coin. She closed the door and sat on the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had done. She was 22 years old, completely alone in a town where she knew no one, about to start a job she was not entirely sure she could do. But she had chosen this, and she would make it work. She washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into a fresh dress, and repinned her hair. When she descended the stairs, she found a small dining room where several people were already gathering. Mrs. Porter made introductions. An older gentleman who worked as a clerk at the general store, 2 sisters who did sewing and mending, and a young man who was apprenticed to the town's only doctor. Supper was simple but good. Roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread. The conversation flowed around Willa, the others asking polite questions about her journey and offering advice about teaching in Marfa. She tried to remember everything, feeling increasingly tired as the meal progressed. She was helping to clear the dishes when Mrs. Porter said, "The town council will want to meet you tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock at the church. Nothing formal, just an introduction." "Of course," Willa said. "Thank you for the warning." She retired to her room shortly after, too exhausted to do more than remove her dress and fall into bed. Through the window, she could hear the sounds of the town settling down for the night: horses, voices, the distant notes of the saloon piano. It was so different from Boston, from everything she had known. But as she drifted towards sleep, she felt something unexpected, a small flicker of hope. The next morning, Willa woke early, dressed carefully, and walked to the schoolhouse with Mrs. Porter to inspect her new domain. The building was small, just one room with rough wooden benches, a large slate board at the front, and shelves for books. It needed cleaning and the books were worn, but it was hers. "The children start on Monday," Mrs. Porter said. "That gives you a few days to prepare. I will spread word that you have arrived." Willa spent the day organizing, sweeping, and taking inventory of supplies. She would need more chalk, and some of the primers were falling apart, but she could work with what was here. The task settled her nerves, giving her something concrete to focus on. She met the town council that evening as promised. 5 men, including the bank manager, a rancher, the owner of the general store, the saloon keeper, and a man introduced simply as Isaac Garrett, who owned one of the larger cattle operations in the area. He was perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair and serious gray eyes that assessed her with the same careful attention he might give a horse he was considering purchasing. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried easily across the small church meeting room. "We are glad you accepted the position. Good teachers are hard to come by out here." "I am grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Garrett," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. The meeting was brief. They asked about her qualifications, her plans for the curriculum, and her understanding that some students would have irregular attendance due to the demands of ranch life. She answered as best she could, feeling Isaac Garrett's eyes on her throughout. When the meeting concluded, the men filed out, each offering a handshake or a nod. Isaac was the last to leave. At the door, he paused. "If you need anything, Miss Hayes, my ranch is about 5 miles west of town. The GR Ranch. Anyone can give you directions." "Thank you, Mr. Garrett." "That is very kind." He touched the brim of his hat and was gone, leaving Willa to wonder why her heart had beat just a little faster during that brief exchange. The weekend passed in preparation. Mrs. Porter introduced her to several of the families who would be sending children to the school, and Willa began to get a sense of the community. Marfa was rough around the edges, but the people were hardworking and seemed genuinely pleased to have a teacher. Many of them had limited education themselves and were determined that their children would have better opportunities. Monday morning arrived, and with it, her students. They ranged from tiny 6-year-olds to strapping 14-year-olds who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. Willa felt her nerves threatening to overwhelm her as she stood at the front of the room, but she forced herself to smile. "Good morning," she said clearly. "I am Miss Hayes, and I am very pleased to meet all of you. Why do we not start by having each of you tell me your name and one thing you would like to learn this year?" It was a gamble, inviting them to participate rather than simply dictating terms, but it paid off. The children responded, some shyly, others eagerly. By the end of the first day, Willa was exhausted but also exhilarated. She could do this. She really could. The days fell into a pattern. Morning lessons in reading and arithmetic, afternoon lessons in geography and history with writing practice throughout. Some students were quick and eager, others struggled, but Willa found she had a knack for finding ways to reach each of them. She stayed late to help those who needed extra attention and arrived early to prepare lessons. She had been in Marfa for 2 weeks when Isaac Garrett appeared at the schoolhouse one afternoon, just as the children were filing out. He was dusty from riding and he held his hat in his hands. "Mr. Garrett," Willa said, surprised. "Can I help you?" "I hope so, Miss Hayes." "I apologize for interrupting, but I have a favor to ask." She gestured for him to come inside, her curiosity piqued. He stepped into the room, his presence seeming to fill the small space. "I have a younger sister," he said without preamble. "Iris. She is 17 and should be finishing her education, but our mother died 5 years ago, and there has been no one to teach her properly. I have done what I could, but I am no teacher. I was hoping you might be willing to tutor her, perhaps a few afternoons a week. I would pay you, of course." Willa considered. The extra money would be welcome and the request touched her. "I would be happy to help, Mr. Garrett. Has your sister been to school before?" "Some. She can read and write well enough, but there are gaps. She is bright, just lacking opportunity." He hesitated, then added, "Our father died when I was 18. I have been running the ranch since then, and Iris has been keeping house. I want her to have choices, Miss Hayes. And education gives her that." There was something in his voice, a fierce protectiveness that made Willa's heart soften. "Bring her by tomorrow afternoon and we will see where she is. I am sure we can work something out." His relief was palpable. "Thank you, Miss Hayes. I cannot tell you what this means." After he left, Willa found herself thinking about Isaac Garrett far more than was probably appropriate. There was something about him, a quiet strength and decency that drew her. She pushed the thoughts away, focusing instead on planning lessons for his sister. Iris Garrett arrived the next day, and Willa liked her immediately. She was tall like her brother, with the same dark hair and gray eyes, but where Isaac was reserved, Iris was warm and quick to laugh. They spent an hour assessing her knowledge, and Willa discovered that Isaac had been modest. Iris was indeed bright, reading well above what might be expected and hungry for knowledge. I will come 3 afternoons a week if that suits you, Iris said eagerly. Isaac says I am to take this seriously, and I will, I promise. I am sure you will, Willa said warmly. And please call me Willa when we are alone. We are going to be spending considerable time together. Iris beamed. Then you must call me Iris. Oh, I am so glad Isaac thought of this. I have been so bored with nothing to do but cooking and cleaning. They set a schedule, and Iris left with an armful of books to read before their next session. True to her word, she arrived promptly every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon, and they worked through mathematics, literature, history, and science. Willa found teaching Iris a joy, her quick mind and enthusiasm making every lesson a pleasure. Isaac came to collect his sister after the first few sessions, always polite but distant. Willa tried not to feel disappointed by his formality. He was simply a concerned brother, nothing more. But on the 4th week, as Iris was gathering her books, she said casually, "You should come to the ranch for Sunday dinner, Willa. Mrs. Kowalski, who cooks for us, makes the most wonderful roast, and Isaac would like to see your progress." Willa hesitated. "I do not want to impose." "Nonsense." Isaac suggested it himself. "Please say yes." So Willa found herself riding out to the GR ranch on Sunday afternoon in a wagon sent to fetch her, the landscape rolling past in shades of gold and brown. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a sprawling structure with a wide porch and corrals stretching out behind. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and several ranch hands were visible going about various tasks. Isaac met her at the porch, and for the first time, she saw him smile fully. It transformed his face, softening the serious lines and making him look younger. "Miss Hayes, thank you for coming. Iris has talked of nothing else all week." "Please call me Willa," she said, then immediately wondered if she had been too forward, but Isaac just nodded. "Willa, then." "And I am Isaac." Iris appeared, pulling Willa inside with enthusiasm and giving her a tour of the house. It was comfortable and well kept, with touches that spoke of a woman's hand even though no woman currently lived there. Photographs on the walls showed a family. A stern-faced man, a beautiful woman, and 2 children who were clearly Isaac and Iris. Dinner was indeed wonderful, and the conversation flowed easily. Iris chattered about her lessons, and Isaac asked thoughtful questions about the school and how the students were progressing. Willa found herself relaxing, laughing at Iris's stories, and drawn into discussions about books and ideas. Isaac, it turned out, was far better educated than she had assumed, his comments on literature and current events revealing a sharp intelligence. "I went to school back east," he explained when she commented on it. "My father insisted. I was meant to study law, but when he died, I had to come home and take over the ranch." "Do you regret it?" Willa asked. He considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, but this land is in my blood. I cannot imagine being anywhere else." As the afternoon wore on, Willa realized she was happy in a way she had not been in a long time. The ranch felt peaceful and the company was comfortable. When it was time to leave, she was reluctant to go. "You must come again," Iris insisted. "Every Sunday if you like. It gets lonely out here with just Isaac and the ranch hands." "I would like that very much," Willa admitted. Isaac drove her back to town himself in the wagon, the sun setting in spectacular shades of orange and pink. They rode in companionable silence for a while before Isaac said, "Iris is thriving under your instruction. I cannot thank you enough. She is a wonderful student. It is my pleasure to teach her. Still, I am grateful, and I hope you know you are always welcome at the ranch. Iris is not the only one who enjoys your company." Willa felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Isaac. That means a great deal." When he helped her down from the wagon in front of the boarding house, his hands lingered at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and Willa felt something spark between them, a connection she could not name but could not deny. After that Sunday, it became routine. Willa taught Iris 3 afternoons a week and joined them for Sunday dinner. She got to know the ranch, meeting the hands and learning about the work of running a cattle operation. She watched Isaac work, impressed by his competence and the respect his men showed him. He was fair but firm, working as hard as anyone and never asking someone to do something he would not do himself. She also saw a softer side of him, the way he was gentle with the animals, the pride in his voice when he talked about the land, the love he showed his sister. More and more, Willa found herself thinking about Isaac at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, remembering something funny he had said, feeling a flutter in her chest when she saw him riding into town. She tried to tell herself it was foolish. She was the schoolteacher, here to do a job, not to develop feelings for a local rancher. But the heart did not listen to logic. It was 6 weeks after her arrival in Marfa when things changed. Willa was walking back to the boarding house after a long day at school when she heard shouting from the saloon. Before she could react, the doors burst open and 2 men stumbled out, clearly drunk and in the middle of a fight. They crashed into the street, fists flying, and a crowd quickly gathered. Willa stepped back, alarmed, but not before one of the men was shoved hard and careened toward her. She stumbled about to fall when strong hands caught her and pulled her out of harm's way. "Are you all right?" She looked up to find Isaac holding her, his face creased with concern. "I am fine. Thank you." He did not let go immediately, his hands still on her arms, his eyes searching her face. "You are sure? You are not hurt?" "I am sure," she said softly, very aware of how close he was standing, of the warmth of his touch through the fabric of her dress. The fight in the street was being broken up by the sheriff and several bystanders. Isaac finally released her, though he stayed close as if ready to shield her again if necessary. "Let me walk you home," he said. "It is not safe right now." "Thank you," Willa said, her heart still racing, though she was not sure if it was from the near accident or from Isaac's proximity. They walked the short distance to the boarding house, Isaac keeping a protective hand at the small of her back. When they reached the porch, Willa turned to him. "Thank you again, Isaac. That was very kind of you." "Kind has nothing to do with it," he said roughly. "When I saw you in danger, I just reacted. The thought of anything happening to you," he broke off, looking away. "Isaac," Willa prompted gently. He met her eyes again, and she saw something raw and honest there. "Willa, I need to be truthful with you. These past weeks, getting to know you, I have come to care for you a great deal, more than is probably proper for a man in my position to say to a woman in yours. I know you have only been here a short time, and I do not want to presume, but I cannot keep silent any longer." Willa's breath caught. "Isaac, you do not need to say anything," he interrupted. "I just needed you to know, if my feelings are unwelcome, I will keep my distance. But if there is any chance that you might feel the same way, I want to court you properly, with your permission." For a moment Willa could not speak. Then the words tumbled out. "Yes. Yes, I would very much like that, because I have come to care for you too, Isaac, very much." The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine. "Truly, truly," she confirmed, her own smile matching his. "Then may I call on you tomorrow evening? We could take a walk, perhaps have dinner at the hotel restaurant. I would like that very much." He took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "Until tomorrow, then." Willa watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her heart soaring. When she went inside, Mrs. Porter was waiting in the parlor, her expression knowing. "That young man has been smitten with you since the first town council meeting," she said. "I am glad you both finally came to your senses." Willa laughed, feeling giddy. "Is it that obvious, my dear? The whole town has been watching and waiting. Isaac Garrett is a good man, and you could do far worse." That night, Willa lay in bed unable to sleep, replaying every moment of the conversation. She had come to Marfa as a stranger, running from a life that had crumbled around her. And somehow, in this dusty border town, she had found something she had not even known she was looking for. Not just a job or a new start, but a place that felt like it could become home. And a man who made her feel seen and valued in a way she never had before. Isaac called on her the next evening, freshly shaved and wearing his best clothes. They walked through town as the sun set, talking easily about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding the herd and improving the breeding stock. She told him about Boston, about her father's death and her stepmother's cruelty, about the desperate choice that had brought her to Texas. "I am glad you came here," Isaac said quietly. "Glad that circumstances brought you to Marfa, even if I am sorry for the pain that preceded it." "I am glad too," Willa admitted. "For the first time since my father died, I feel like I have a future to look forward to." They had dinner at the small hotel restaurant, a simple meal but made special by the company. Other diners cast curious glances their way, but Isaac ignored them, his attention focused entirely on Willa. When he walked her home, he took her hand, and the simple contact felt momentous. "May I see you again on Saturday?" he asked at the boarding house steps. "Iris suggested a picnic if the weather holds. That sounds lovely." "Good." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Willa." "Good night, Isaac." Saturday's picnic was a success. Iris came along as a chaperone, though she tactfully wandered off to explore whenever Isaac and Willa wanted privacy. They spread a blanket near a creek that ran through Isaac's land, the water providing a pleasant background music to their conversation. Willa watched Isaac skip stones with Iris, saw the easy affection between the siblings, and felt her heart expand. This was what she wanted, she realized. Not the fancy life her father had tried to provide, not the respectability her stepmother had valued above all else. This, simple pleasures, honest people, a man who looked at her like she was precious. As summer deepened into fall, their courtship progressed. Isaac called on her twice a week, and Willa continued her Sunday visits to the ranch. The town fully approved Mrs. Porter, reporting with amusement that she had been stopped no fewer than a dozen times by people wanting to know when there would be a wedding. "They are getting ahead of themselves," Willa protested, though she could not help smiling. "Are they?" Mrs. Porter asked knowingly. The truth was, Willa had already begun to imagine a future with Isaac. They had not spoken of marriage yet, but the possibility hung between them, sweet and promising. She loved the ranch, loved watching Isaac work, loved the quiet moments they stole together. She loved his integrity, his kindness, his dry sense of humor. She loved how he made her feel safe and valued, how he listened to her opinions and took them seriously. And she was fairly certain he loved her too, though neither of them had said the words yet. It was October when Isaac finally spoke. They were riding together across his land, Isaac showing her the new calves born that spring, now grown and sturdy. The sky was brilliant blue, and the air had finally cooled from the summer's oppressive heat. They stopped at the top of a hill that overlooked the entire ranch, and Isaac helped Willa down from her horse. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice serious. He led her a short distance to a flat area sheltered by cottonwood trees. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," he said. "I used to come here as a boy when I needed to think, and lately I have been coming here and thinking about the future." "What kind of future?" Willa asked softly. Isaac turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "One with you in it, if you will have me. Willa, I know we have not known each other long by some standards, but I feel like I have been waiting for you my whole life. You are everything I never knew I needed: smart, kind, brave, beautiful. When you are here, everything makes sense. When you are gone, I count the hours until I see you again." Willa's eyes filled with tears. "Isaac, I love you," he said simply. "I am completely, absolutely in love with you, and if you feel even a fraction of the same, I want to marry you. I want to build a life together here on this land. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want children if we are blessed with them, and I want to grow old watching sunsets from this very spot. Say yes, Willa, please say yes." "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, joy flooding through her. "Yes, Isaac. I love you too, so much that it frightens me sometimes. Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and then he kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Willa felt like her heart might burst from happiness. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and laughing. "I do not have a ring yet," Isaac admitted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes before I presumed." "I do not need a ring right now," Willa said. "I just need you." They stayed on the hill until the sun began to set, making plans and dreaming aloud. Isaac wanted to marry as soon as possible, and Willa agreed. There was no reason to wait, and besides, propriety dictated that she could not continue teaching once she was married. The town would need to find a new schoolteacher, but Willa found she did not mind. She would miss the children, but the thought of being Isaac's wife, of making a home with him, filled her with excitement. They rode back to the ranch house as dusk fell, and Iris took one look at their faces and shrieked with delight. "Finally! I was beginning to think Isaac would never work up the courage to ask." "You knew?" Willa asked, laughing. "Of course I knew. I have been planning your wedding in my head for weeks. When will it be?" Isaac and Willa exchanged glances. "A month," Isaac suggested. "That gives us time to make arrangements but does not drag things out unnecessarily." "A month is perfect," Willa agreed. The next 4 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Isaac bought Willa a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that she loved immediately. They met with the minister and set a date, November 15th. Willa gave her notice to the school board, who were disappointed but understanding, and immediately began advertising for a new teacher. Mrs. Porter helped Willa sew a wedding dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk. Iris threw herself into planning with enthusiasm, organizing everything from flowers to food. The whole town seemed caught up in the excitement. People Willa barely knew stopped her on the street to offer congratulations. Mrs. Kowalski, Isaac's cook, began preparing food for the reception. The ranch hands, who had all become fond of Willa during her visits, announced plans to give the couple a wooden cradle as a wedding gift, built by hand. Willa wrote to her stepmother, informing her of the wedding more out of duty than any expectation of a response. She was not disappointed when none came. The only family that mattered to her now was the one she was creating: Isaac, Iris, and the community of Marfa that had welcomed her so completely. The night before the wedding, Willa lay in bed at the boarding house, too excited to sleep. Tomorrow her life would change forever. She would become Mrs. Isaac Garrett, mistress of the GR Ranch, and she would leave behind the last vestiges of her old life. She felt no regret, only anticipation. November 15th dawned clear and bright, the sky a deep blue and the air crisp with autumn. Willa dressed with Mrs. Porter's help, her hands shaking with nerves and excitement. The dress fit perfectly, the silk whispering as she moved. Mrs. Porter pinned up her hair and tucked in small white flowers Iris had brought that morning. "You look beautiful, my dear, Mrs. Porter said, her voice thick with emotion. "Isaac is a very lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Willa corrected softly. The wedding was held in the small church, packed with what seemed like every resident of Marfa and the surrounding ranches. Willa walked down the aisle alone, having no one to give her away, but she did not feel lonely. All these people had become her family over the past months. And then she saw Isaac, waiting at the altar in a new suit, his eyes locked on her with an expression of such love and wonder that she felt tears threaten. Iris stood to the side as her bridesmaid, beaming with joy. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They spoke their vows clearly, promising to love and cherish each other through all the days ahead. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart swell. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the ranch, the barn having been cleared and decorated for the occasion. There was music and dancing, more food than they could possibly eat, and toast after toast wishing them happiness. Willa danced first with Isaac, then with several of the ranch hands, then with the bank manager and the general store owner. She laughed until her sides hurt and felt more joy than she had known was possible. As the evening wore on, Isaac stole her away from the crowd, leading her outside to the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, the night cool and quiet after the noise of the celebration. "Happy, Mrs. Garrett?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she said, leaning back against him. "Isaac, when I came to Marfa, I thought I was running away, but I was really running toward you. I just did not know it yet." He turned her in his arms, his face serious in the starlight. "You told me once that you felt like you had no home after your father died. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you always have one, here with me." "I do," she whispered. "The moment I met you, I started to feel it, like I had finally arrived where I was meant to be. You made me feel like I had come home." They kissed under the stars, and Willa felt the last piece of her heart slot into place. This was home, not a place but a person. Isaac was her home and she was his, and together they would build a life. The party continued without them for a while, but eventually people began to leave, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Iris hugged Willa tightly, whispering, "Thank you for making my brother so happy, and for being the sister I always wanted." "Thank you for sharing him with me," Willa replied, her eyes damp. Finally, it was just the two of them, alone in the house that was now theirs. Isaac carried Willa over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the bedroom they would share. What followed was tender and sweet, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Isaac was gentle and patient, making sure Willa felt safe and cherished every moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking softly and making more plans for their future. Life on the ranch quickly became routine for Willa, though it was a routine she loved. She rose early to help with breakfast, spent her days managing the household and learning all the skills she needed as a rancher's wife. Mrs. Kowalski taught her to cook for a large household, to preserve food for winter, to manage supplies. Iris, who stayed on at the ranch, became not just a sister by marriage but a true friend. Willa also continued to work with Iris on her education, though now it was more a joy than a job. The new schoolteacher, a young man from Austin, was doing well with the children, and Willa occasionally helped out when he needed an extra hand. But mostly, she focused on her life with Isaac. They settled into a partnership that felt natural and right. He valued her opinions on ranch matters, and she learned to ride well enough to accompany him when he checked on the herd. They made decisions together, planned together, dreamed together. Winter came, cold and harsh by Texas standards, though nothing compared to Boston winters. Willa loved sitting by the fire in the evenings, reading aloud while Isaac worked on accounts or mended tack. Sometimes Iris joined them, and sometimes she visited friends in town, giving the newlyweds privacy. It was in January that Willa began to suspect she might be pregnant. She said nothing at first, waiting until she was sure. When a visit to the doctor confirmed her suspicions, she could barely contain her excitement. She planned the announcement carefully, waiting until she and Isaac were alone one evening. "I have news," she said, unable to keep from smiling. Isaac looked up from the book he had been reading. "Good news, I hope. The very best. Isaac, we are going to have a baby, in late summer, the doctor thinks." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her. Then he was across the room, pulling her into his arms, his face full of wonder. "A baby, truly." "Truly," she confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Willa, you have made me the happiest man alive." He kissed her soundly, then knelt and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Iris was overjoyed when they told her, immediately beginning to plan and fuss. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Willa bloomed with health. Isaac became even more protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work and worrying constantly about her well-being. Willa found it endearing, even when she had to gently remind him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. Summer arrived, hot and dry, and Willa grew larger and more uncomfortable. Isaac hired a woman from town to help with the housework, insisting that Willa rest as much as possible. She chafed at the restrictions, but understood his concern. It was a blazing August afternoon when the labor pains began. The midwife was summoned, and Isaac paced outside the bedroom, refusing to go far even when Iris tried to distract him. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Willa wondered if she had the strength to continue. But the midwife was experienced and encouraging, and finally, as the sun was setting, a baby's cry filled the house. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Willa's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Willa looked down at her son, overwhelmed with love so fierce it took her breath away. He had a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect features. When Isaac was finally allowed in, he approached the bed almost reverently. "Willa." His voice was hoarse with emotion. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Isaac sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring at the baby with wonder. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Willa. Thank you for this incredible gift." They named him Matthew, after Isaac's father, and he was baptized a month later with half the town in attendance. Willa adjusted to motherhood with a joy she had not anticipated, finding that caring for Matthew felt natural and right. Isaac was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son, marveling over every tiny change and development. The years that followed were full and happy. Matthew grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's smile. When he was 2, Willa became pregnant again, and this time the labor was easier, resulting in a daughter they named Sarah. 2 years after that came another son, Joseph, and the house was full of noise and laughter. Iris eventually married a young rancher from a neighboring spread, and Isaac and Willa hosted the wedding at the GR Ranch. Watching Iris dance with her new husband, Willa reflected on how much had changed since she had arrived in Marfa as a frightened, uncertain stranger. The ranch prospered under Isaac's management. He expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and earned a reputation as a fair and honest dealer. Willa managed the household with skill, raising their children and maintaining a home that was welcoming and warm. She never regretted leaving teaching, though she made sure all her children learned to read and write at an early age. They faced challenges, of course. There were droughts that tested their resources, cattle diseases that required heartbreaking culling of the herd, and the general unpredictability of ranching life. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Willa back to the hill where he had proposed. The children were with Iris for the day, giving them rare time alone. They sat under the cottonwood trees, older now but still standing strong. "You remember what I told you here?" Isaac asked, holding her hand. "Every word," Willa said. "You told me you wanted to build a life together, to watch sunsets from this spot, to grow old together." "And have we done that?" "We have," she confirmed, "and it has been more wonderful than I ever imagined." "Willa, you once said I made you feel like you had come home, but the truth is you made me feel the same way. Before you arrived, I was just going through the motions, doing what needed to be done. But you brought life and love and meaning to everything. You are my home, just as I hope I am yours." "You are," she said, tears in her eyes. "You absolutely are." They kissed, a decade of love and partnership in that simple contact, and Willa felt grateful beyond words. She had arrived in Marfa with nothing, running from pain and loss. And this cowboy, this good, decent man, had made her feel like she had finally found where she belonged. More years passed. Matthew grew into a teenager, then a young man, showing every sign of becoming the kind of rancher his father was. Sarah was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to learn everything. Joseph was the wild one, constantly getting into mischief, but with such charm that it was hard to stay angry with him. When Willa was 38, she had one final pregnancy, a surprise that resulted in twin girls, Emma and Grace. The house was more chaotic than ever, but also more joyful. Isaac built an addition to accommodate their growing family, and Willa often stood in the doorway, watching her husband play with their children, and marveled at the life they had created together. Mrs. Porter passed away when Willa was 40, a loss that hit her hard. The older woman had been like a mother to her, and Willa grieved deeply. But she was surrounded by love and support from Isaac and her children and the community that had embraced her all those years ago. The children grew and eventually began leaving. Matthew married a girl from town and took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, building a house on the property for his own family. Sarah went to Austin to attend a women's college, then returned to teach at the school where Willa had once worked. Joseph left to seek his fortune in cattle trading, writing frequent letters full of adventure and humor. The twins, close as ever, decided to open a shop in town selling needlework and cloth. And through it all, Isaac and Willa remained each other's constant. They celebrated 25 years of marriage, then 30, their love deepening with age rather than fading. They became grandparents multiple times over, their house filling with grandchildren on holidays and special occasions. On a summer evening when Willa was 53, she and Isaac sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they both loved. Isaac's hair was gray now, and Willa's dark hair was streaked with silver, but they still held hands like newlyweds. "Do you ever think about that day you arrived in Marfa?" Isaac asked. "Young and scared and so determined to be brave." "Sometimes," Willa admitted. "I think about how lost I felt, how uncertain, and how quickly that changed once I met you. I knew the first time I saw you that you were going to change my life," Isaac said. "I just did not realize how completely or how wonderfully." "I came here as a stranger," Willa said softly, running from everything I had known, and you made me feel like I had finally found home. Not just a place, but a sense of belonging, of being exactly where I was meant to be. You were meant to be here, Isaac said firmly. With me building this life, it is the one thing I am absolutely certain of in this world. Willa leaned her head on his shoulder, content in a way that went bone deep. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Matthew and his wife were staying for dinner, and their grandchildren were playing a noisy game. Laughter drifted out through the open windows, and Willa smiled. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," she said. "Thank you, Isaac. For loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me a home." "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago," Isaac replied. "For taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than sense. Best decision I ever made." They kissed, gentle and sweet, a kiss that held decades of love and partnership and devotion. When they finally went inside to join their family for dinner, Willa looked around the table at the faces she loved most in the world and felt a deep sense of peace. She had come to Marfa as a stranger, lost and alone. And she had found everything she needed: a place to belong, a community that became family, and most importantly, a man who loved her with his whole heart. Isaac had given her a home in every sense of the word, and together they had built a life rich with love and joy. As the evening progressed, filled with food and conversation and laughter, Willa caught Isaac's eye across the table. He winked at her, that same warm smile that had captured her heart all those years ago, and she knew that despite all the changes time had brought, one thing remained constant: their love for each other, as strong and true as the day they had first acknowledged it. The ranch would continue for generations, she thought, passed down through their children and their children's children. But more than the land, more than the house or the cattle or any material thing, what would endure was the love they had built together. That was the real legacy, the true home they had created. And as the stars shone bright over the Texas plains, Willa Hayes Garrett silently thanked fate or Providence or whatever force had brought her to this dusty border town. She had arrived as a stranger, uncertain and afraid. And she had found, in the most unexpected of places, with the most wonderful of men, the home her heart had been seeking all along.